This is an update about what's going on with server meshing 4.0, testing, what happened with 324, all that kind of stuff, stability and whatnot. This will be not quite a deep dive because I don't have too much to add to this, but I did want to watch this with you regardless and get a chance to have some commentary on it.
Joining us on the show this week, a special treat, a short abbreviated show, won't be as long as normal. I know I said that a couple weeks ago. This is real because this guy's super important. He's got places to be. Is a Chief Technology Officer of CIG, Benoit.
Oh, you're not going to try the last name, are you?
No, Beausejour. No. I stumbled on your first name. It's just
okay.
Like we used to.
Benoit.
Used to be the oldest trope of SCL. We'd get somebody on the hot seat and they'd forget their own name. I don't think I've ever forgotten my own name.
What is it that I do here again?
What is it that you do here?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell people?
Sure. So I'm the Chief Technology Officer for CIG. So I'm basically representing all the engineers at Turbulent, yes, but also at CIG at this point. So everybody.
That was perfectly timed. Representing all the engineers at Toes. Thank you, MotoX, for the Prime sub.
I basically care for, make sure they have what they need to succeed, orient the work, get the amazing task of calling priorities, and basically helping people make sure that they win at their jobs and that they deliver on what the game needs.
So
that's my job.
That just sounds like everything is your fault.
Oh my God. Yes.
I'm going to put this at 1.25 speed. I hope you guys don't mind. If it's too fast, I'll slow it down again.
Benoit has agreed to be on the show this week, again, for an abbreviated show. So we can we're in an interesting point in our development, technology-wise. Server meshing is on the horizon. We attempted to get a huge tech preview going last night, but there were some network issues, as I understand it. 324 just went out.
Put out a message about that yet? Let's see.
It's an interesting moment in our technology history, so we thought we'd bring him on and answer your questions. So as normal, we put a thread up on Spectrum. We asked you to submit your questions to Benoit. Most of them were about things like, where's my spaceship? Or what can you tell me about this feature and whatnot. That's not specifically what we're here to talk about Benoit with. Talk about Benoit. Jeez.
I don't know.
Nope, not yet.
Did you know that I'm not sleeping well? So we collected your questions.
Dude, none of us are sleeping well.
We're going to go through them now. So the first question I have, Benoit, is simply we've recently released Alpha 324. How'd that go?
Well, it's an interesting patch. Let's just say that. So 24 has a lot of new uses to some very large systems, right? And so
some foundational systems.
Foundational systems, yes. Systems that have been in the game for a long, long time.
Getting their first update.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's been a bit of a rocky release, simply because there are some issues that happens when more players are present that affect core flow of the game. Right? So anything that affects you retrieving a ship or leaving the hangar or things like that are instantly high priority. Some of them work well, on internal builds, and then when we get real players on it, there's always something new. In this case, for 24, there's a lot of issues that happen related to cargo elevators, freight elevators, the new hangars.
No, we know that.
And so we've been hotfixing quite a bit, figuring out what was going on. Some missions didn't work for the same kind of reason. And so we've been kind of analyzing data and hotfixing.
You won't even say the name ATC.
Well, yeah. So let's just say that like I said, there are some systems in the game that are complicated, right, that date back to a very long time.
That's right.
And ATC is at the core of it, right? It's one of them.
Show me on the doll where ATC touched you.
Oh my God, all over. But and so yeah, ATC, transit, are systems that there any issues with these systems are debilitating instant.
ATC, transit, NPCs, and gosh, what's the fourth? What are the four horsemen of Star Citizen, of ruining your day in Star Citizen? Probably just like general bugs is the fourth.
And so, it's not a case of if it works 60% of the time,
just servers.
It works every time. It's a case of if it doesn't work 1% of the time, then it's very high priority to find a fix. So we've hotfixed a lot of stuff in the last couple of
I
days.
just consider
There's more coming from
elevators
the
part of
gameplay teams,
transit, you know.
obviously. Some changes to how we deal with obstructions in the hangars are coming as well, which is has been one of the most problematic issues. Like the checks on that side were a lot too, I like to say, hardcore, which would cause a lot of side effects and cause
Right.
some hangars to break. So we're in the process now of changing all of that stuff to release a little bit the hold that the ATC has over cleanup and how it prevents some stowing. So there's already a bunch of hotfixes that went live for that. So
The hold over our
that will
well-being.
alleviate a lot of the issues people have been running into with hangars specifically. But otherwise, like 24 is a super interesting patch for a lot of reasons. Also because we've introduced some new metrics to Star Engine that have launched in 24. So we have now a lot more information about the state of the game servers and how they perform. So we've instrumented a lot of things in the engine. And to be clear, we've had metrics before. This is more about long-term metrics that we track over a long period of time. So that allows us to really correlate important events, right? Like an area streaming in causing problems, certain game components costing us, frame time in certain areas. And so I like to say that these new metrics are like if optimizing the game is like a large cornfield, the tools that we used to have to do this were very optimized, very great microscopes, right? But now with these new metrics, we have a radar that tells us exactly where to look for and drill down. And so I'm hopeful that with 24, we already got a couple of reveals, just seeing the live release roll out with these metrics. And so I'm hopeful that's going to bring forward a lot more improvements as well. So that's why I'm excited about it.
It's one of those things where
It's
hard to
corn.
see it now, but so much of what we're building towards with the way that freight elevators play into pyro and stuff that you're going to see at CitizenCon later this year, next month, 6 weeks, are all based on stuff that's in 324. It's I understand it's rough now and stuff, but it is a foundational patch that will be built upon and will bear fruit in future releases. All things. What we hope.
Yeah. One of the things that maybe I don't know if we've communicated this way. I mean, Chad probably did outline this in one of the Inside Star Citizen, but is that the tech behind the way the hangars function is actually it's an instance interior, right? This is the first use we have of the instance interior system, but you can imagine what we'll be able to do with that technology moving forward. I know that some of you guys have encountered ghost sounds when you go in your hangar, like you can hear other stuff.
Like,
ooh. That's because in reality, the hangars are superposed on top of each other and instanced in place. And so when you go to your hangar,
It doesn't sound that ghosts make, right?
I'll just qualify it as black magic rendering culling that happens, that you're basically in your hangar. That's what you see, right? Now, there's a bug with audio. That's why you've heard some audio from the other interiors, but the reality is all these hangars are actually on top of each other, which is when you start thinking about it, it's a bit weird. And then when you request your ATC gateway, that's when your actual instance is moved into place, so you can exit and enter. And so that tech will be able to use that with throughout the universe, for a lot more things for instancing interiors, which is super key for a lot of the gameplay we're trying to do.
All right, so we are 10 minutes or 1/3
Or ghosts
through our
say boo, right?
question down. So I'm going to skip. You tell me when we get to that 30-minute if you can stay later or whatnot. But I'm gonna skip to some of the more pertinent questions here to make sure we get them in. Server meshing. So obviously we had a series of tech previews earlier this year. We were supposed to start one up last night UK time. We're hopeful to start one up again today. A lot of folks are. I'm gonna combine three questions here and get it.
And we still don't have the preview channel. And honestly, you've only had like 2 or 3 this year. That continues to be a sticking point for me. I was very interested in seeing how they utilize the preview channel, and they really haven't. And I'm hoping that after server meshing stops freaking sucking all the air out of the room, they do make more use of that and use that as a place to test the things that are more not stable.
And get a broad thing here.
What's up, Bursa? Evo.
What are we testing for now? Why has the gap been so long between tech preview tests?
Yeah, that.
And is this really working as well as we hope?
Yeah. So the gap, I'll start with the gap, right? So later in the spring, end of spring, we did a couple of good tests that gave us a lot of good data, right? So what we've been trying to do on the meshing side is be a bit more pragmatic and methodical in how we approach the development. And so these tests really gave us a lot of data, right? Because of the way we conducted them, we were able to try different mesh configurations, look at performance, specifically on the hybrid, which is the replication layer service, and to really be able to hone in on what we need to improve in order to get the scale that we want. And so what came out of these tests in the spring was that there was already things that were touching on the performance of the hybrid and the game server communications that needed improvement. And so this is what we call the component's called the NMQ, the network message queue. Now that's there's a lot of chatter online about, there's a replacement thing and it's called, is it RabbitMQ, whatever. No, so we're not even in that realm. We're talking about really the networking component that transmits data between game server and client, game server and hybrid and game servers. It's like this. Think of it as the communication library underneath it. So, like all games, that technology is using UDP transfer.
Does that make it like the underlying functional part of the replication layer? That's how I understood the replication layer was transporting data from clients to servers to clients to entity graph to everything in between.
Transport to get eventually consistent updates out as fast as possible. Now the network message queue had a couple of issues when it got a lot of data in a very short period of time. So these spikes would cause, and that's what we saw in the final server meshing tech previews, was that when large areas would stream in and a lot of players would join in and leave at the same time, the network message queue could go into a tailspin where, think of it as a drain, right? And you're trying to put stuff in the drain. And at some point, if you exceed the bandwidth of the drain, then water starts filling up. Now, the way that manifests itself in the game is interaction delays. So, pressing F, trying to get in the ship, and it takes seconds before the system reacts. Powering on the ship takes forever.
God.
Now I'm not talking about the one-offs, because you can.
That's what really makes the game feel super janky too, is like the way that things just kind of hitch when you're doing everything.
Have interaction delay in your game based on your connection. That can absolutely happen. So it's influenced by your machine, your connection. So if you're playing on a 486 without the turbo button on a satellite connection, you might get interaction delay, right? But in this case, we're talking about widespread, like when an entire shard gets into that state, right? So that's what we saw in the tech preview. So that we had to go a little bit back on the drawing board and actually fast track one of the refactors we want to do, which is the introduction of a replacement message queue. Now we call it replication message queue, replacement message queue, kind of, we've basically called it RMQ. And so this RMQ is a new implementation of the
CIG has always been top of the line when it comes to naming things, so I understand.
That has more abilities to adapt to higher bandwidth and react to these large message pushes that happen when we start streaming large areas or when a lot of players are coming in and out of the game rapidly. And so what we're testing now is RMQ in a server mesh setting. So for you guys who don't know, 324, half of the servers on live currently run RMQ. The other ones are running NMQ still. We've been gathering data across both of them to see the performance improvements, the gains. So far, those have been really good.
See, that's good. It's great to hear that they are moving forward without making a big deal of it. This is kind of part of what I think we were hearing them talk about. Gosh, I don't even remember where that would have been now. I don't know where it is, but they were talking about that in the monthly report, adding some stuff in to do some testing in the background in preparation for server meshing. And I'm glad that they're doing that without needing to make a big deal out of it. I'd love to get that information, but it's good to hear that things were still going along, even if they weren't necessarily talking about it.
A lot of really good improvements. And so now we want to test this in a server mesh setting. So what changes in a server mesh setting is that now the hybrid is going to manage more than one game server that simulate these key areas. And so there's more traffic going through the hybrid for this at key moments. And so that's what we want to test with this next set of tech previews. So what our hope is that the issues that plagued the 800 players last time, where there was a lot of interaction delays, right? Also, some of those tests had a lot of game server crashes at the time that we did the test. But in this case, we're hopeful that all these interactions delays will be, basically gone from this bandwidth side of it. So that means we can get to bigger shards, and the experience is going to be enjoyable across that. The thing that actually did work really well in our spring test was the actual server meshing tech itself. So authority transfer, management of territories, all that stuff was fantastic, a really big success. But we did need to take a little bit of a sideways step to optimize the RMQ, which is now done, and also getting mission tested right now by you guys on 324.
See, this is the kind of, I think this is, when I talk about the server meshing inside Star Citizen that we saw a couple of months ago, and like, this is the kind of stuff I kind of would have expected to hear. And I know this is more crunchy, better for Star Citizen Live, but when we got that update, it didn't really tell us, it didn't give us a lot of context as to where we were with server meshing. And this feels like it gives us more of an idea of where we are. Doesn't tell us everything, but it's not just saying that things went well and we'll move on from here. It's like, okay, this was a problem, and this is very CIG of them to find their problem, work on it in the darkness, and then tell us once the solution is ready to be presented. And while we still haven't seen it, this is how they did things like with the entity graph replacing iCache, and I guess they didn't do this last year when they gave us that little update about how the entity tracking services of their third-party provider weren't really up to snuff. That was like one of the times when they told us a problem right when it happened. But this is kind of classic CIG.
So that'll be new information to people who, at this moment here, that one half of the 324 servers are running on NMQ and one half are running on RMQ. Has there been a noticeable performance difference?
Yes. Overall, like so we track some of these interaction delays, and you'll see this is a common theme that I've been pushing quite a bit, is that we need to measure.
Imagine the panic if after the test they had been like, our network messaging needs a full rework, but we still got that panic. We got it 3 weeks ago when they delayed 4.0, and everybody was like, but it was coming in Q3. Instead, we got the panic, but we didn't have an explanation to go with it. I'm not saying it would be better for them to do it that way, but this is generally how it goes. And maybe this is how game companies talk to their publishers and investors. Like, and again, I'm not saying that we are equivalent to a publisher or an investor. I'm just saying this is par for the course. And it would have been nice if during that Inside Star Citizen on server meshing, we had gotten at least some details about this kind of stuff. Who doesn't love surprises? Well, I hope to be surprised with it actually working next time they do the test, which I really do hope is in the next couple of days. We'll have to see.
A lot at the amount of events, duration of these events, which players get them, and so we're able to see a noticeable improvement on that side. There are still, some interaction lag happening, but they're not systemic anymore.
It's those other causes that you mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So
that's cool. The thing that's also nice about this is that we have the ability. You probably noticed, especially with 24, that we have a new set of ways to deploy and canary technology on live to mission test it. So not only are we doing tech previews when it's necessary, but we also are throwing tests. So sometimes you might end up on a server that's running something new and you don't even know about it, but we know about it because we're looking at all these metrics to make sure that the new tech works as expected. And if it doesn't, we can backtrack and stop the canary, things like that. So we've been doing a lot of that in the last for the entire 24 cycle, really.
I want to ask a follow-up question. I feel like I have to here.
Mrs. Tomato trying to tempt y'all.
There are people that are just... We all know that every version of Star Citizen is a test bed. Even the full live alpha that's what alpha means. It's a test bed.
Sure.
Evocati, PTU, live, tech preview, whatever you call it, they're all some level of test bed.
Yep.
There are people that are just trying to log in and play right now. And some of those people it sounds like some of those people are going to 324 with RMQ and having a better experience, and some of those people are logging in and through no fault of their own are going to NMQ servers and having it degraded. Do we have a timetable for when?
All right, somebody make a post on Spectrum. Rise up, second-class MMQ citizens. Get your pitchforks and rise up. We will take back the power from those RMQ posers, those f***ing douchebags. I was supposed to also bleep that, sorry.
We just switch all of them over to RMQ, so we stop.
Now, the interesting thing is that currently for the servers running NMQ, we're not seeing heightened interaction delays, right? I guess just comparatively between them. We do want to keep going at it, so we're being prudent, right? So we started with a couple of shards, then we moved on to a quarter, then to a half, right? And so as this is more stable, it's very possible that within the release of the next couple patches, all servers will be running RMQ. I mean, at this point, there's not much stopping that from happening. It's just prudence to make sure that there's no new issues that would come on.
Right.
It's like if you replace the netcode for an entire game, right? Like there might be side effects, and then the typical invisible player, new crash on whatever, bad handling of slow connections.
It's responsible not to just switch everybody over.
I don't even know what I just missed. Go back.
there's not much
Gosh.
stopping that from happening. It's just prudence to make sure that there's no new issues that would come on.
Right.
It's like if you replace the netcode for an entire game, right? Like there might be side effects, and then the typical
Exactly. Okay.
invisible player, new crash on whatever, bad handling of slow connections.
It's responsible not to just switch everybody over.
Exactly. So NMQ does work well. We know where it falls down and at what moment. We can also identify the shards that do run into this. There was a bit in 23 of an accumulation in certain areas that we noticed shards that were a lot older had this accumulated data. And it's not persistence data necessarily, but it's based on the state of the world where it would transmit more data, and that would cause some more a heightened state of interaction delay. And so that really clued us in a bit more that our plan to do the RMQ was the right one.
Okay. 2/3 of the
But our goal is to roll it out to everybody as soon as we can.
I am
right,
so hopeful that. Oh my gosh! Like, imagine if they just bring server meshing out into the preview channel and it like actually works and it's smooth and stuff. One can only blend their head in so many different directions. So that kind of talks about the preview channel, but this is just talking about the preview channel in terms of server meshing. And I really hate to be this guy because I've been this guy so many times this year now bringing this up. But like, let's go back to what was said about the preview channel at the end of last year, because this is important.
And you'll be able to follow along with its development firsthand on the preview channel. That's the planets, moons, space stations, settlements, and outlaw lifestyle that comes within the Pyro system, but also an entire host of additional new features.
Okay, see, this is what's still missing. Like, we got to test some of Pyro on the preview channel, but there was also a host of additional features listed here that we haven't really gotten to see.
Content and quality of life improvements like, fully functional jump points, the new quantum travel system, new vehicle HUD and MFD work, resource management, hacking, and much, much more, all being worked on in tandem.
That's what is getting me. I'm glad that we've gotten to test server meshing, and I'm glad the preview channel has been used a couple times, but this talk is addressing why server meshing wasn't done in the preview channel throughout the year. But there are other things that we're supposed to use the preview channel that we never really heard about. And they're not, they don't change the whole direction of the game. They're not going to define the year by any means. I would still like to know like what happened there.
Again, I'm going to the big ticket ones because now we're 2/3 of the way through. Desync.
Yeah. Well, completely related.
Desync's gross.
Not completely related. That's not true. That's not fair. So the network transmission layer, right? Game server, game client does interpolation, right? So as your ships or your actions move, your actor, so your character and your ship, when you're actually piloting a ship, the client does interpolation about your movements. So it's trying to predict what the server will say. And then the server comes in and says, yep, that's what it is. And that comes from the network queue, right? So obviously when we have congestion on the network, it's going to cause some of this. But it's also server FPS, of course, has a very large effect on this, right? And so
I'm going to make a video about this. Every time I post a poll or something about what people are looking forward to most, everybody is like, stability. I just want the game to work good. I don't care about these other features. I just want the game to run well. And I think it would be nice to have like a solid 7 to 9 to 8 to however many minutes video to talk about how they're aiming to improve stability. And this answer seems to go over that.
Desyncs are a combination of factors, right? That when you see a desync, it's could be because the server is simulating a piece and he's back in time a little bit, so he's skipping time steps. Well, he's not skipping time steps. It's not the right way to do it. I'm trying to make it simple so that we don't go too deep into the weeds. But think about it this way: if the server is not running at a very decent frame rate, then when those frame rates dip, the effect will be some kind of level of desync for certain kinds of items. And so with the RMQ, we're hitting on the stuff that's related to the network transmission. That will help definitely. And with the new metrics in 24, that helps us to really hone in on what is the cause of the cost over time on frame time. Where is our frame weight? What resources are being used? What resources are being allocated? So the thing that might not be clear when you look at the game, but So the Star engine is really good at streaming stuff in dynamically and streaming it out dynamically. That's the key feature of the engine. But that also has a certain level of cost. So depending on what players are doing in the game, the servers might be doing just fine, right? Certain areas are just super easy, but then other areas stream in and then they become problematic. And so that's what we're looking at with those metrics, is to see what areas and what entities in those areas are costing us the most, so that we can optimize the things that really affect those desyncs in that gameplay, literally. So right now, the improvements we're getting there is several engine fixes, or optimizations, I should say. And then the network queue replacement is going to help on desyncs quite a bit.
Okay. So, like we've said a couple of times, this has been the truth for as long as I've been here, for 10 years, as far as meshing whites. A bug doesn't always have just one cause. Sometimes the manifest.
Just want to say before they continue going here, it's good that he laid that out and gave us some solid. They've kind of hinted at it, and we've heard it said a couple times in ISC now that server meshing can definitely help with server FPS, which can have a huge impact on the instability that we perceive. I think that's really, really important to actually put out there. Not necessarily to set expectation, I guess to set expectations, just to like make it apparent that it's not just bad programming. Now, there might be bugs in the code and problems there. Of course, there always are. There are always glitches that are going to happen whenever somebody is coding something. But the fact that this big back-end process they've been working towards can have a big impact on stability says a lot, because a lot of people have been asking, what the heck is, like, when is this game going to be more stable, more interesting to play? And it might not be when server meshing first drops, but server meshing allows them to finally tackle a really big part of that, it seems.
The effect can actually be caused by several things, and that's what makes bug smashing so hard. Is you end up finding this cause, and then it still happens. This also causes it, and then it happens half the time, and then you find something else. But this also causes it. The same goes for desync performance and stuff like this. Sometimes it's this that causes it. Sometimes it's that.
Sometimes it's like I can speak to one bug. I know you guys like bug smashing, but for example, at the launch of 24. We start getting reports that the original intro cargo missions were no longer functional. And so at first, shock, like, what's going on? It's not like we haven't tested this flow at all. We've been running on PTU for a while, plus internal testing. So what's going on?
I literally saw somebody post that the devs probably never tested the update before they released it. Like, do you really believe? Really?
So we start looking into it. And so, long story short, obviously you need to discover things.
People say the darndest stuff on Twitter.
A lot of players on live compared to PTU will abandon missions, go offline during missions, cancel missions, and so the cancellation flow of the missions would leave the cargo boxes in these inventories that we use for the missions that are shared. And so these would accumulate all these cancellations, and it weren't being properly destroyed. And so at some point, these inventories reached a point, I think it was per location, if I remember right, but that there's so much standby cargo boxes waiting there that your box is further down the data set. So, and that code didn't assume that we'd have that much in those inventories. It was never meant to have that many items. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of boxes. And so at that point, you would not find your boxes and so you couldn't start your mission because those boxes were way further down. And this was completely based on accumulation of cancellations of, players abandoning missions when they're on them.
Classic developer blaming the players. Look at you. I'm kidding. Just a joke. Don't worry.
That's a fantastic example of something that doesn't happen in PTU that does happen in live. Because in PTU, everybody's focus is on testing the mission. So everybody accepts a mission, and the majority of people play through the mission because they're trying to complete it because that's the test.
This is the kind of thing you would think would have been tested by the Cloud Test Launcher, though, where it can just replicate player actions to like a massive amount. They developed that tool, and I would love to hear how they've been using it, because I would hope that it had the capabilities to do this kind of testing on a large scale without a lot of players.
Correct.
And then you get to live and you get a completely different behavior. So it's one of the reasons it's when people ask often, why did you push it to live and stuff like that? It's because many times, this is just one example, that's the only way we find the outliers, the big ticket things.
And I mean, shipping patches too is complicating the development in general. So like I call it the cost of shipping, but developing, right, is good. But when we give you guys a patch to test and we give you guys a patch to play, that's where a lot of new issues are discovered for the size of games that we have. Even PTU, like you mentioned, like people recopy, they have a behavior that's, it's not their normal behavior. It doesn't go through progression. They're not cutting in the middle of it. It's a lot different. And so shipping these patches, the cost of shipping is enormous. But it is very rewarding in that we then harden, in the first couple of days, like I mentioned, in 24, like was just scramble we need to fix this immediately. And so a lot of, kudos to the teams that were pushing hard to get those hot fixes out. But that's basically I think shipping these patches like requires an enormous amount of energy, right? And it's absolutely worth it. But it's where, pushing it over the hump, at some point you need to make a call, right? Because the longer a patch stays in this limbo of like, we're almost there, and are we going to discover something else at some point? With the model that we have with our game being alpha, we have to move it over the hump, get those last issues sorted out so we can continue development. Because internally, like it's like a bunch of freight trains, right? Like we got this stream of development, this release is holding the rest of the developments. At some point we no longer have a choice. We do have to move forward.
Yeah. we feel that with 4.0. I do wonder though if that does help. It helps you kind of like double check your work before you move on to another segment. Because if, like, I'm just thinking of when I used to do lab reports or something in school, and I was going through the process of making a lab report. If every time I reached a new section of that report, I had to basically put that in for testing, for grading, would that mean that the final product in the end was better because I didn't have to do the whole thing over at the end? It's not an exact one-to-one comparison kind of thing, but the idea of getting such consistent progress checks from such a large number of people must be like a silver lining kind of thing.
Last question about performance and stuff. We talked desync performance, like the different causes. Server frame rates are one of the obvious things that players can often see. They can turn on the.
We also share that information.
Yeah.
Like we report it to the client so you can see it with our display.
Yeah. So one of the biggest offenders of server frame rate is also the reason why in 324, when you put something on when you put your gun on your table or something on the table, it starts bouncing and flopping around and driving everybody crazy. Physics.
Sure.
How do we get the server frame rate up? Is it just refining physics? Is it buying bigger servers or better servers and just increasing the cost of running the game to an unmanageable thing? Does server meshing distribute the load across it well, and then that'll get us higher frame rates? This
would be the stability answer, the video I would make.
You're right. Like our game servers do perform a lot of physics calculations and a lot of physics simulation. That's the nature of the game, right? Thrusters, ship simulation. Like we track so many types of geometries in the physics engine. It's crazy. Like we have a really great physics framework in the engine. For sure, like the most immediate gain there is server meshing for sure. Like we've seen in our playtest significant frame rate increase across the board for areas. Because you have less physical entities, right? In general, so that means less geometry, less allocations, less simulation. Think of the server frame rate as
we all expected it, but it's good to hear from the people working on it.
As a bunch of phases, right? And the engine is extremely well multi-threaded, meaning that we can do a lot of things in parallel. But the challenge there is always determining what we can do in parallel that doesn't have impact with other things. So what can we actually simulate that doesn't depend on anything else? And so that's true of entities. So when we do an entity pass or what we call an ECUS update, so that's every frame. And it's true of physics, and it's true of networking. So all these phases at some point need to wait at the end of a frame for everybody to be completed before it comes up. And so obviously this is all bound on entity count and also physical entity count. So server meshing from the top is going to reduce that count by a lot because you have way less areas to simulate. So less entities to simulate means that the overall wait time across the frame will be better. And so that's the first gain for sure, right? And then we can control that granularity as our meshing technology moves up. We can control the zones, the size of the zones that we want to simulate. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have an area that's filled with something and that is going to have a high, either network or engine cost or physics time cost.
Oh yeah, because
that can still happen for sure.
You know when we increase the player counts to 800, all 800 are going to go and cram themselves into the same 890 jump.
Of course. And so that's a bit why you're going to see some jitters, especially with cargo. We're putting a bit more on the gameplay side. We're putting a bit more of the physics on the spotlight because we're using them to move, with tractor beams, moving boxes, things like that. And so, of course, we're looking at improvements. But the first one, metrics has actually already given us quite a bit of very interesting things to look at. And so I'm very hopeful, that the radar is talking about there is going to, allow us to find even more optimizations there that we can do. There's always optimizations, guys, by the way. It's always a thing. But server meshing will definitely help quite a bit. We've seen that in the last test. Like, even with the very large shards, servers were running on average a much higher frame rate than our current game shards. So I'm really hopeful for those gains, because that's going to be a game changer for the game. Like, obviously, performance for the game. If we gain 1 millisecond on frame time, that's 1 millisecond directly to your gameplay. Right? So for sure, like server optimization for sensors is at the top of my mind.
Any amount of milliseconds, please. Thank you.
I synchronize with game team.
Straight into my blood veins.
So server meshing, optimization, obviously, and when I mentioned physics, that's not me throwing the physics team under the bus. That's me, as Benoit said, recognizing how much physics simulation we do in our universe. Is there anything else we can do? Just optimize and distribute the load across multiple servers?
Somebody needs to send Jared a Mjolnir helmet to put on that back wall. I know it's not Star Citizen, but I can't help but feel like it's missing. It should be up there.
Correct. There's also obviously content optimization. So, like you mentioned, there's always more than one cause, right? So optimization is, when we talk about optimization, because you mentioned one thing in your question, which was, do we just get
cleaning up your
a limit to that? Yeah. A limit that we've, I don't want to say we've reached it. We're not there yet, but there's still a server size that makes sense, right? In terms of cost per player and operations in general, right? Of something that makes sense. And so when you do optimizations, right, you need to have a box to fit in, right? So if you're saying our budget frame is X amount of milliseconds, well, then you need to optimize towards that. And you need to touch on everything. It's never just one cause or one thing. And so obviously how you multi-thread, how you parallelize the work across every phase, so that touches on every team. But then there's content as well, right? Like a good example is the first time we put cargo boxes in the game. I forget which patch at this point. I'm a bit losing track, but the actual one SCU box was composed of like 30 some entities, which was like, it looked really good.
Oh, it was such a dumb box.
But, when we looked at it with the scope, it's like, okay, yeah, no, we can't do that. And so content optimization is the other pass of this, right? Which is reduce the entity counts, try to be smarter about, how we construct object containers. Streaming is also one, how we streaming things. So the other area of battle on the server optimization front is once you have server frame rate, so you have entities loaded, you're simulating them every frame. That's one area to optimize. The next one is putting stuff in and out of that simulation. So streaming data in, streaming data out. And so there's these phases that every entity and game component go through. And those are, these components are written by game developers and they do different things. Right. We have, I think, over 1,000 game components. They're not all active, but registered, roughly 1,000 different game components. And so each one of those have 7 phases they go through in their life cycle.
Jesus. 2
of them are really important. They call it register and unregister. And so this is when a game component that's attached to an entity. So entities have components, and entities getting loaded, we need to run the phases on the components. So that those components, when they register, that's where they do, I'm a security component. I need to register with the security system and let know of the AIs in the area, what's going on, and things like that.
They gave us a really good look at, let me see if I can, here we go.
How mutations are applied to the database. Each mutation is composed of multiple commands which are executed in sequence, but commit to
So this is a constellation Andromeda, and I guess I don't know what these are out on the sides, but you can see how many entities they have.
Which are executed in sequence, but committed transactionally to the database. They either succeed together or fail and roll back together. This ensures that the changes to the graph are always consistent and no lost writes or errors can cause data corruption. For example, a mutation consisting of detach, transfer, and an attach commands would succeed only if all 3 commands are applied successfully.
So like if somebody shot a weapon off of your constellation, he's basically saying that this link that links the constellation to the gun out here would have to detach, and the whole game would have to recognize that in the entity graph, and then that would have to transfer all of that information through the replication layer, which is what they're talking about here, from the client back to the servers, or I guess maybe it's a server. I don't know if that would be a server side thing, but either way, it has to transfer it to everything in this network so that everybody is updated all at once for anything that happens to in all of these webs, for every ship and every vehicle and every outpost, all these things.
They either succeed together or
Yikes.
fail and roll back together. This ensures that the changes to the graph are always consistent and no lost writes or errors can cause data corruption. For example, a mutation consisting of detach, transfer, and then attach commands would succeed only if all three commands are applied successfully. The system retrieves.
So, yeah, you can see the server meshing effect on his hair in this new one. Some gray coming in here. Oh my god.
Those happen when a spawn batch occurs. And so what people refer to as the spawn queues is when the server needs to spawn things, right? That is a queue that is basically processing these phases to put the entities into the engine for simulation. And so that's the other area of battle, is optimizing these phases so that the spawn is faster and is sharper. And despawning is the same, right? So you finish a mission, you leave away, we stream out, we need to get this out.
The funny thing about this is, like, once you look at the networking of the background of all of this and think about how it has to be replicated across all the servers in a shard, like you got 10 servers splitting up a shard in Stanton. All of those servers have to get updated, then send all those updates out to all the clients that are connected, however many hundreds or thousands of players that is. And then you go back to something like Maelstrom. No, this is the wrong video. You go back to something like Maelstrom, which is also simulating some ridiculous bit of damage and like breakable parts. And you look at how many breakable parts make up a ship.
Beams to be able to model stress and strain. I'll go into more detail in that in a bit. Breakable clusters are hierarchical. They mirror the hierarchy of all attached entities involved. They also embed the hierarchy of all animated joints. And they also embed the hierarchy of all physical geometries. They essentially represent a graph.
That's too much. And they want to do this for all the ships. Like, it's absurd. It's kind of insane. And I'm not a dev. Maybe it's not as crazy as it looks to a lay guy like me. Oh, lay guy. But it comes off as kind of gnarly.
Right? And so that's the other area of optimization in battle that also has an effect on gameplay that we're really diving into with these new metrics.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought up the content optimization in addition to feature and service optimization. One of the recurring criticisms, sometimes valid and we deserve it and sometimes not, is how often we rework a thing. There's been 3 or 4 versions of the Freelancer, for instance, and there's a really good reason for that one. But and that's because we discover inefficiencies in the way it was built the first time, sometimes because of fault, sometimes because there just wasn't a better way to make it then, and there is now, and stuff. So revisiting that, reworking that allows us to make it more efficient. The Freelancer famously, gosh, if old time backers will remember, and I've told this story before, but if you've heard it, I'm sorry. The second version of the Freelancer had 200 rivets, little rivets that went around the panel lines, and the artist who built it for us, it was a third party client at that time because it was still early days. Sure. They copied the rivet from the concept model instead of I don't want to spend time remaking a rivet, and then just copied and pasted a concept rivet over the entire ship 200 times. And so a single Freelancer now had a greater resource cost than the entire Idris.
I finished a lot of CAD related assignments in college like that. Not super efficient.
In Squadron 42. And folks, for the old hangar module days, will remember, if you owned all 4 Freelancers and you loaded that up when they got remade, your hangar module was a slideshow.
That was it.
And stuff like that.
I remember also there was a thing with the original Cutlass Black.
Yeah.
First Cutlass, that if it would be in your frustum view, that was it. Like that thing was like, I don't know how many polygons it was. It was a crazy assembly originally. But yeah, content optimization is a big part of this, right? And it's It's also the hardest because the universe is very large, right? So when we talk about content optimization,
Absolutely
I use the
huge.
blocks as an example, but we're talking about, harvestable asteroids, plants, AI characters, your character, like everything, right? Needs to be looked at under the scope to go like, is it under the entity budget? Is it, draw calls? Because the client performance is also important, right? Like we're talking about server stuff now, but your client also needs to render that stuff, right? And so content optimization is a super big part of this that we have to get a lot better at in general. Because our approach is always to
that artist is like watching this, like, how did they catch that?
Time to optimize it, but sometimes we have to because of the nature of our development, we have to put it in one patch and then optimize it in the next one, and so that does cause some frame drops at some points, but
we constantly make improvements to our level of detail system and stuff like that. We are over by 10 minutes, and I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm gonna keep you for 2 more questions.
All right.
And I'm gonna say this while you're live, so you can't say no without looking like a dick.
That's okay.
Thank you. Do it.
Obviously, Turbulent got their start with the project, building the platform, building the website.
Yeah.
Let's see how I want to phrase this. This isn't a question from the thing. This is my question. I've got you here now.
Let's free ball it.
You're on the hot seat.
Go. Hey, come on. I'm ready.
It's like, let's go.
One of the many annoying things that exist, one of the most annoying for me and for many people, is that these items that they've pledged for, these smaller items that they get on the website that are rewarded from events like that, they get lost. They fall through the cracks. They disappear into the unknown through no fault of people's own, and there's no way to easily recover that in the verse. We've been talking about this idea of pledge item recovery for a while now. It was actually last November when we first really started to talk about it. It did not arrive in 3.24 like we and a lot of folks hoped. Is there anything you can tell us? Give us some hope.
Well,
is this?
Will it
come out tomorrow, please?
So in terms of the item recovery in general, right? There's been a lot of discussions in 24, which was, to be honest, very interesting for myself and the design team mostly to read. Was the different opinions about the item kiosk, right? And drawer, no drawer, access to inventory. I mean, this is still gonna go on, right? And now that we have at least one release done with the current system, but I'm not saying
no drawer.
But that's one of the reasons for why the item kiosk exists also, right? Was to basically give you guys access to get your items back, right? And so I don't want to say when the feature is actually going to drop because I don't really know specifically when, but I can tell you that adding all those kiosks in every location, getting them hooked up, and getting the actual recovery part, we had to take it out of 24 because obviously 24 had to go at some point, right? And there was more pressing, development and issues to solve with that, so we had to make that decision. But
man, I don't believe that was ever even going to be part of 24, honestly, and I doubt that's a hot take. I think most people probably weren't expecting that to be part of 24. I'll catch you later, Anno. Thanks for hanging about, dude.
The actual kiosks themselves are already in there. I mean, you see that in the verse now, they're usable. And so that means that feature is in a good place now to be implemented and be added in a patch. I can't tell you which one, but I can tell you that we talk about that stuff all the time. About, hey, when are we going to close the loop on this? When is it going to land, right? In terms of the database work too in the back ends, that's already ready to go. So it's really about, when can we get cycles from the game teams to get that in there. And I do agree that's for me is also a bit, that's a pet peeve of mine, like being able to get your items back, especially when they're unique is super key. So
yeah, I mean, I use the term pledge item recovery, but it's really unique item recovery. It's the thing.
Yeah, it's the ones that you only have one of and that are important. Now that said, there are plans, for how this is going to work for Star Citizen, not just during the development, but as a whole, right? Because
insurance.
There's more, and we're going to discuss about this. I think at CitizenCon a little bit with some of the things we're going to be showing, but there is.
They should just tie it into item insurance and make anything you've ever bought with real money have lifetime insurance, and then allow you to insure other items like components and stuff, and use that as their whole. This is how you get it back quickly kind of thing. It would tie into the gameplay a little bit more, at least.
Plan on how purchased items are going to work and how that ties up to the gameplay of the universe. And so there's going to be more updates on that for sure.
Okay. But not tomorrow?
Not tomorrow, unfortunately.
Okay. Last question is just sort of a personal one. We've been talking about a lot of tech stuff here today.
Yeah.
You and I go back 10 years now at this point. There was a time when I was one of the few people at CIG that interacted regularly day to day with the Turbulent folks. You've gone from
could be tied to crafting, yeah.
Turbulent And the last time we had you on the show, we knew this transaction was happening, but we couldn't tell anybody yet, which is why we talked a lot about the history of Turbulent in that show, by the way. Now that it's happened, and now that it's gone through, it's still going through, or it has gone through, but the after effects, the repercussions of it are still happening. How's that been? How's that been for you? Going from CTO of Turbulent to CTO of all of CIG, to going from a web development platform to a full game development thing.
I mean, ultimately it's software, right? So for me, it's I'm a bit of a natural there. It's been a crazy ride for sure in the last year, going from I'm going to use general numbers here, like 100, 150, maybe engineers in general, to the amount that we have at CIG and the different teams. The thing that I find the most satisfying is that we have so many incredibly talented engineers at CIG, like from our engine team, graphics, AI, audio, tools, R&D groups, gameplay teams, VFX programming, all these, like our teams are so talented.
Please remember the janitors.
Right? And so it's really an honor to have the opportunity to try to make their lives better, right? Improve the internal processes that we have for our engineers, make sure they have career paths at CIG, that they're fulfilled, that they work on things that matter, right? So one of the big roles of a CTO is to make sure that we're working on the right things, right? That we're not just developing and then hoping for a result, that we're actually driving for the results that we want, making the right calls across that. So for me, it's been very, very fulfilling. Also very difficult because the context switch is crazy, right? Going from all these subjects, right? But very, very fulfilling. And I'm so proud of the team that we have. Our engineering teams at CIG are best in class, right? They're really making miracles with smallish team, like in terms of the pure engineering teams, like.
Hey, you never know, dude. Maybe there's like a janitor engineer class, kind of like somebody's got to develop the new tools that you can use to more quickly clean up after the people. You got an automatic plate picking up kind of thing or something.
An engine, building the tech that we need for this game. I mean, the level of talent is really incredible. So it's been roughly almost a year now, that I've picked up this role, and it's been only, positive. It's also been really positive, I think, for the Turbulent family in general that joined in the CIG family overall. It's made communications easier. It's made our missions easier to communicate. It allows also the cross-culture pollination, things that Turbulent do well, things that CIG do well. We try to get the best out of it, try to influence each other out of it into one big family. So it's been a really good ride so far. I'm really enjoying it. It's really, really cool. Plus, I love this project. There's nothing more that I want than for this. For all of our tech to come together and then to really make this game the best thing that it can be for them. So
for anybody who didn't know, the company that he was CTO for, Turbulent, he's a co-founder, worked with CIG for a long time before they were acquired. They worked with them since like 2013 or 2012. Then they got acquired, I think, in 2021 or 22. And they've done a lot of the back-end stuff. I'm actually going to post a link to a video. You can control-click this if you'd like. I highly suggest it. This is a video I put out earlier this summer that talked about the acquisition and why they did it, and my own theories about, well, not theories, something they literally said, that the studio was focused on creating star systems more quickly. I posed it as their 100 star system problem. They're not going to make 100 star systems, but I think this company is very focused on that now. Since I put that video out, people from the company have reached out with both some minor corrections as well as thanks and interesting insights that I probably am not supposed to talk about necessarily. But I'll say this, the video did at least strike a bit of a chord somewhere in the company. I don't know where, but you can check that out. It summarizes a lot of what he's talking about here. And save it for after the stream, though. Hang around.
So it's for me, it's like I'm just ecstatic about it.
It's been nothing but positive. It's such a bullshit executive answer.
No.
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't think they're going to make 100 systems. I mean, it was a different game when they talked about 100 systems.
No, hang on. Don't say that. What's been difficult is, if you want the downsides of it, is really catching up to speed to all the disciplines, right? Understanding the state of things to be able to make calls, right? So I mean, my people laugh here because at the office, they lock me up in this office because I'm always on calls nonstop from like 8 a.m. to, like, I think the first time I get up during the day from my desk is at 2 p.m. and then, I need to eat something, and then keep going, right? And so
Sounds
that's
awful.
the part that's difficult. The intensity is really up there, right? Really, really up there. But at the same time, I feel like all these things really move the project forward, and so it's motivating. But it is hard on the day to day for sure.
A big acquisition is never easy. There's a lot of overlap in jobs. There's a lot of differences in work ethic and how you want to go about certain tasks. While this was a good acquisition for CIG, it has not been entirely straight up positive, which is interesting. I mean, that's how acquisitions go. But I would be interested in knowing just how much of the plans that we have been presented with over the last couple of years were derailed in some way because of this acquisition, or slowed down, or possibly even sped up.
All right. Well, Benoit, thank you for staying much longer than
all good.
we agreed.
I expected that.
I try to do the short shows every once in a while, but then I always pair the idea of the short show with the people who talk a lot, and it's just. I think I know better. But
cool.
I appreciate you sticking around. I'm going to let you go. Folks, thank you for watching. This has been Star Citizen Live. What do we call it? Tech Talk with Benoit,
Right.
Benoit Beauséjour.
Oh my God, so good. Approved.
Do you want to know what my orange case is? Do you remember Fisher Price Constructs?
Oh my God,
What?
really?
Yeah,
Why is that?
Shit.
Got my whole.
Why?
Oh, is it the OG one too?
Yeah, it's the OG. I'm an engineer now too.
Got the constructs in it.
Yeah, I'm an engineer now too. Well, it builds.
That means I manage you.
If you haven't checked out yesterday's Inside Star Citizen on creatures and characters, it's a show. Be sure you watch it.
Probably piss a lot of people off.
Come back here next week. Next week on ISC, we finally pull the curtain fully back on the 2 new Zeuses that are now coming in a 324X patch. It's X because we don't know if it's going to be 0.1 or 0.2 or whatnot. It's and the new MFD.
There's a possibility of it being 0.1. That would be insane. I feel like 0.1's coming out within the next week, so that doesn't seem likely. Probably 0.2.
That's coming alongside it. The new MFDs are super cool. And if you're like, how can new MFD be super cool? Check it out.
They are
super
cool.
They're
From
super
what I've seen.
That's Benoit. I'm Jared. Thanks for watching. Thanks for just letting me do what I do. We really thought yesterday's ISC might be the last one they let us publish. Keep your eye on the robertsspaceindustries.com website and Spectrum for news about the tech preview channel. If that hasn't started yet, it'll start when they're ready for it. And it's really important for the project and for everybody involved that we get as many people in there
Hasn't started yet.
to stress this stuff as possible. So your participation is tremendously valued and appreciated if you can make the time to jump in there and help us out. So thanks a lot. I'm Jared. That was Benoit. I already did that part. That's Dave and Pete over there. You never see them. Say hi, guys. Okay. We'll see you next week, everybody. Take care. Bye.
I wonder if he ever actually does publish something without being sure it won't get him in trouble. Okay, so that was a little bit of an update on server meshing stability and what's going on with testing. I think there is some interesting information there, especially about the stability of the game and what can improve it. I think I'll work on a video for that. God, I got do a video for these server meshing tests coming up though. Stability. I need to do one for how to make a spaceship. There's a lot of potential stuff for this, which is good. I like having a lot of videos ready for pre-CitizenCon, but boy, we're going to be busy.